When you begin a new database in CenterPoint, you'll need to establish beginning balances that represent the financial picture of your operation before entering first transactions in CenterPoint. We're going to go through how to enter beginning balances for the different type of accounts. We'll start with going to Setup and Accounts again. We're going to click on the Balances tab, and in CenterPoint, each fund that you have in your database will maintain separate balances. So you're going to be working with one fund at a time. So if we select our lookup, we can select which fund we want to begin with. And in the upper right, click the Beginning Period button. That will take you to the beginning period of the database, which is the month prior to entering your first transactions. We're going to be entering beginning balance for our balance sheet accounts, and these are our balance sheet account types. If you right-click, you can expand all groups so that you can see each account type with the account category and the accounts underneath that particular category. Down at the bottom is an Options button. CenterPoint stores values for book values, modified cash values, and market values. When you enter the book values and save it, it will automatically copy those book values to market values. And later, if you need a different market value, like for instance for your machinery and equipment, you can change that value later. But we're going to begin with doing book values. You'll then click your cursor in the book value column on an individual account like this CD, and then enter the value for that particular asset as of your beginning period. So we're going to type in a value here. And then you just keep going, and you will only be entering values at this point that are for the fund that you're working on. So for example, we wouldn't enter a value for fire pension checking because there is a fund for fire pension fund. But we would go to general fund checking and enter the value for that particular checking account. And you would just go on down your list and enter any values for this fund. In accounts receivable, if you have any beginning customer invoices that have a balance as of your beginning period, those balances will not be entered through this screen. We will be entering those in a customer invoice so that we keep the balance for each individual customer. And we'll do that in a little bit. If you are doing fixed assets in CenterPoint, your different account categories that are depreciable, such as building and improvement, machinery and equipment, vehicles, land, they are able to maintain fixed asset items under each one of these accounts. And if you're using fixed assets, those balances will be done under Setup Fixed Assets. If you're not using fixed assets, then the balances can be entered right here for the total amount for each one of these accounts that you have listed under these different categories. But we're going to show you how to do the fixed asset items in just a second as soon as we're done in this screen. We're going to keep on going down, and under liabilities are accounts payable and credit cards. Those again won't be entered through this screen. They will be entered in vendor invoices for any payables that have not been paid yet as of the beginning of your first transactions. But if you have any liabilities that you owe that have a balance for this particular fund, such as we have a long-term bond payable here, we can put that balance in. So we could enter the value. Under the equity accounts for fund balance, you won't be entering any beginning balance for the retained earnings account that you assign to the fund, which will be typically your current year fund balance. That will get updated automatically as you're entering your other balances. That's what's making a balance journal entry here when you're putting in beginning balances. But if you have a balance for other fund balances, like your surplus carryover, that balance can be entered in as well. So we'll enter a balance for that one. And when you're done entering the balances in this screen, then you can click your Save button. It will give you a screen indicating how many accounts have been updated, and you can see that the market value was updated as well. And if we scroll down, we'll see the balances we entered down at the bottom, and it updated our current year fund balance. We're now going to go to Setup Fixed Assets. If you're using fixed assets, you're going to go to Setup, fixed assets, and fixed assets again. And this screen is done the same way. Go to the Balances tab, select the fund that you're going to be working with, select Beginning Period, right-click on Assets and expand all groups, and now you can see your individual accounts. And here under Equipment, we have some individual fixed asset items. So now we could click in that row and update that particular fixed asset item. So we're going to put in a value for these items, and then click Save, and that will update the market values. And well, on market values with fixed assets, you have an option to not update market values on a fixed asset, and then you can go ahead and switch your option button to market. This database is set that way. It's a preference if you don't want market to be updated with entries to fixed asset. And now we could put in a different market value here if we wanted to, like that, and save it again. Okay, and when you're done with the fixed assets, you can close out of that. And next we're going to go to our vendor invoice and put in any beginning accounts payable that we haven't paid yet as of our first month. So we would select our fund again that we're working with, select a vendor, and perhaps it is, we'll just do City Graphics here. And in the account, it probably will be easiest just to use your fund balance. You could use the account that you actually are the expense account that was for this particular vendor. But if you're in the beginning balance, it's not going to affect an income statement. So we could just select your fund balance account of your current year fund balance. And here it is. Okay, and then put in the amount that you owe that particular vendor. And we'll put in a value. And our accounts payable account is filled in. If this were a credit card, then you would, instead of using accounts payable, you would use your credit card account. And that'll be in your lookup, so you would use Visa instead of accounts payable. But that will just update the appropriate liability account. And you're going to make sure that your date is your beginning period of, in this case, was December 2018. We'll adjust our amount up there, and we're ready to save that. That will update the accounts payable with that vendor balance, and you would go ahead and do that for every vendor that you have an outstanding accounts payable balance with. If you have any outstanding accounts receivable balances, then you would select Customer Invoices from your lookup over here, or you can go under Processes, Revenue, and Customer Invoices. And again, select our fund that we're working with and a customer. We have a customer, Zelda. Okay, and we're going to use again the current year fund balance and the amount that this particular customer owes us. I'm going to do the adjust amount and change our date to 12/31/18 again, so we're in the beginning period. We could put a notation here, a beginning balance if we want to, on these beginning balance entries, and we're ready to save that. And that updated the customer invoice and the balance for that particular customer. If you are starting CenterPoint in the middle of your fiscal year, then you also may want to put in year-to-date balances for your income statement accounts. That would be done under a general journal. So we're going to go to Processes, General Journal Entry. Again, pick your fund and select the date for your beginning period. And you would be now looking at a current revenue and statement of revenue and expenditures, or an income statement, something that's giving you a year-to-date of what activity has happened so far, and each one of the accounts that had activity will be listed on that report. Those are the accounts that you're going to select in this general journal. So we would select, start with our revenue accounts, Let's order this, and we'll go down to our revenues, and we'll pick for our CenterPoint Village, perhaps some permits. Let's do that one. And you can put in a department if you want to. We'll put in general. And then when you're doing a revenue, it will be a credit. If it's a positive value, it will be a credit. So we'll put in the value of the year to date that's on our statement that we're going by. And you would keep going on each revenue. When you're done with the revenues, and all of those will be credits if they're positive values. If they're negative, then you would put it in as a debit. Then you would start with your expenses. So if we had one of our utilities, let's go down to our expenses. And here's a disposable expense. And again, general revenue, and the expenses will be a debit. So we would put in the year to date for that particular expense. And you would keep going with each individual expense account that you have. The very last account that you're going to use is, again, that current year fund or fund balance, whatever your account is that you're assigned as the retained earnings account in your fund. And click the difference button down in the lower right. That will balance this general journal, which in your case, you will have a whole long list of all your various revenues and expenses that are on that report that you're using. And that will indicate what the year-to-date activity has been for each one of your accounts. So that at the end of the year, when you do a year-to-date, it will also be representing that data that hasn't been entered individually in CenterPoint. You can put a notation on here again, a beginning balances, and you are ready to save that. Now, if we go back to our accounts, we can see how our account balances for CenterPoint Fund has been updated. We're going to expand all again. And we now have an accounts receivable balance for Zelda. We have our machinery and equipment for individual pieces that we put in there under equipment. Under liability, we have an account payable for City Graphics. And down at the bottom, our current year fund balance has been updated with all of our various activities. So this would compare to a report that we're using to establish beginning balances. Those should agree, and you can run a balance sheet under reports and financial statements and balance sheet. And here is a balance sheet 2-column, and we can do that for a beginning period. Select our fund. So we know we're only looking at that one fund, and preview. And this will show us our balanced balance sheet, and this should be agreeing with the balance sheet that we're going off of to put in our beginning balances. When you're done with this fund, then you would simply do all of those steps again, starting with the next fund and putting in the balances for each individual fund you have in your database.